In terms of the maintenance and enhancement of the natural ecosystems within the landscape, the project had a focus on adaptation to climate change, as I already mentioned, and mainly define the following type of interventions: to increase the species diversity in the natural ecosystems. The landscape ecosystems are degraded and somehow simplified. Even the remnant relic major cedar forests are quite simplified. And we realized that looking at the reference ecosystems, that they should have a more diverse structure and diverse species composition. This is a basic element for climate resilience, as a large set of the species will respond differently to any climate hazard that may affect the different ecosystems, and increasing diversification will increase the responses of the ecosystem to the climate risks. Also, the project has developed interventions to facilitate the species migration needs in altitude. How the project has done this is to look at the climate envelopes models for the different target species. The project has targeted around 50 tree shrubs and herb species, and to make sure that through the diversification objective that I just mentioned, that we do planting interventions in areas like in buffer areas between one bioclimate and the following bioclimate to increase diversity. So we facilitate or accelerate the capacity of the species to move upwards in altitude. Also, this landscape includes a number of isolated relic major forest, mainly cedar forest, the very emblematic tree in the Middle East. And one of the objectives in terms of climate change adaptation was to promote, from one side, to conserve the remnant forest stands, but also to promote connectivity among these forest stands in a way that we can facilitate regeneration and the establishment of a forest, larger forest area that has more functionality, integrity, and is more resilient to climate change. At the same time, looking at the reference ecosystems and the species, and thinking of the need to get the buy-in of the local population, we identified which species have not only an ecological value, but also a social and economic value. And we try to promote the use of these species in all the restoration activities in a way that the local population can see not only, may not have a clear idea of why to use the species if there is only one objective of improving the ecological conditions of the system, but if the species have also a social and economic value, they may realize that the importance of this restoration activity. And also looking at the climate change adaptation, FLR interventions look at mainly managing biomass to reduce climate risk, managing forest and agricultural biomass. And looking at forest and agricultural biomass with not only climate risk reduction objective, but also with a social and economic objective. So how to convert a waste into a good for people. Again, as a way to get their buy-in of the FLR interventions. For this reason, the project has selected, it's 45 plus because it's an alive project, and every year we are increasing the number of species, but around 45, 50 multi-purpose native plant species with ecological, social, and economic value. And the project has developed production protocols for the first time, protocols that were not existing because these species were not produced in tree nurseries and used for restoration activity. But so this is a major contribution of the project. So developing these production protocols to get high quality seeds and seedlings of these 45 to 50 multi-purpose native plant species. The project looked at the origin and quality of the plant material in the field, undertook laboratory tests, looking at viability, health, calibration of the plant material, cleaning, developing cleaning, stocking, dormancy break, and pre-germination protocols, and then developing all what is needed in terms of the nursery production of seedlings. So from the establishment of the nursery itself, looking at the location, soil quality, water quality, availability, accessibility of the area, making sure that the production equipment is reasonable and the real needed one, to avoid excessive investments of equipment that is not necessary, and to make sure that the production is in line with the climate conditions and the ecological features of the species to be produced. Make use of adequate seedling containers, substrate composition, fertilization, irrigation, micro-irrigation. And a very important aspect of the plant production, develop drought preconditioning and nutritional hardening of the seedlings in order that they will be harder and more resistant to face the conditions in the field once they will be planted. In the slide, we can look at one picture in the lower part to the left with the director of the reserve, Nisar Hani, having in its hand a seedling that demonstrate the best features in our case. A small aerial part with a much larger in comparison root area, which maybe it doesn't look like as a beautiful seedling if we are looking at gardening, but we understood that this is the best seedling to resist stress, water stress, especially in the field. So this gives you an idea of, I mean, we did a lot of work in order to make sure that seedlings will be high quality and will resist as much as possible stressing conditions in the field. Then, in terms of the natural ecosystems, also the project developed planting techniques to improve soil water availability and also to increase species diversity. Soil water availability because at least in our case, in the case of Lebanon and in the case of the Mediterranean region, water stress is the main limiting condition during the very long summer period and will be a major cause of failure in the planting of seedlings if the techniques are not making the maximum to promote runoff harvesting and to avoid soil water evaporation. And increase species diversity also because the objective is to restore the ecosystem, not just planting trees. And by restoring the ecosystem with a large number of species in the same planting area, like between 10 to 20 species, we will include the species that are resprouting, species that are attract seed dispersal fauna, species that fix nitrogen in the soil, species that preserve or prevent soil erosion, have more capacity to prevent soil erosion. So the combination of species with different features will increase the resilience of the restored area in the case of any eventual climate hazard or human hazard. In terms of innovative techniques that were used in the project, was about the hole location and the depth of the hole, the soil mulching, mainly using materials that are existing in the restored area, like mainly stones, that have demonstrated high capacity to prevent soil water evaporation. Establishment of microcatchments in the upper part of the hole, in the two sides of the upper part of the hole, in order to capture runoff water. Also to define area enclosures like a woodland islet, especially in areas that have an important use for livestock pasture. These woodland islets, the enclosures protect the islets from livestock, and we reach an agreement with the shepherds because the planting, I mean the species planted, will be important as a future fodder for livestock, but also we mowed the grass inside the enclosures and provided them to shepherds. So in a way to make a win-win situation that they acknowledge the importance that these areas will have in the future for them, and also at the same time to make sure that the planted area will be well protected. Also, these woodland islets played an important role as supporting the species migration needs in altitude. So, because creating these islands in the landscape has facilitated the access of the species to higher areas. Also, the project planting techniques make use of the nursery effect of the existing vegetation. Several trees and shrubs have a facilitating effect for those species that are planted, creating microclimate conditions and facilitating their growth. So the project identified these species and made use of them to facilitate the growth of the planted seeds and seedlings. Also, as I mentioned, high species diversity was a major principle for the project, between 5 to 20 species in the same area. The project looked at the planting densities, the species selection, and the seedling distribution in the planting area. And an important feature for us was to adjust the planting period to the climate change trends. We understood that we needed to postpone the planting period to the first rains that are happening in a later period in autumn, which becomes a problem because it's becoming very close to the period of very cold conditions and frost. So we needed to adjust very well the planting period, mainly in autumn. And then the planting material. The project made use of seeds, seedlings, and cuttings, depending on the conditions of the area. Always with the idea that seeds are the best, but in not all the cases they could be used because of predation from fauna. Even if the project developed a number of systems to protect the seeds from predation. Anyway, we played with the three types of plant material. As I mentioned, looking at the following FLR principle, the project applied a variety of complementary approaches, locally adapted with a cost-benefit vision. This means that the project were not just looking at planting seeds, seedlings, or cuttings as a typical ecological restoration activity, but also looking at, for instance, improving water storage and infiltration throughout the landscape, managing forest and agriculture, and mainly the biomass for bioenergy production and compost, managing cattle with a climate risk reduction focus, not only for the economic value of cattle for people, but also as an additional component to keep clean the areas that were managed in terms of biomass collection and reduce the risk of fire. Also, the project looked at the restoration of the abandoned agricultural terraces to become productive again, but supporting green value chains, linking food production, energy production, and tourism. And also, because it is a protected area, we were looking at all the tourism and education activities that were linked to the forest landscape restoration. And through forest landscape restoration, restore networks of natural trails, establish botanic gardens with an education and to facilitate the visitors to know about the landscape, and also to know about the importance to restore the landscape. I will not go in detail into with this slide. Just the message here is that we were looking very carefully in a dichotomical way to look at the site conditions, and according to the site conditions, whether they fulfill demands of ecosystem services, whether the natural recovery of ecological integrity was possible in the short term, whether there is a limited risk erosion of hydraulical disruption, whether restoration is viable in terms of costs, and then define the type of interventions that were priority for each targeted site in the landscape. In terms of cost benefits, just a brief information about what the project did. In terms of forest restoration, I mean active restoration activities in the field, we had two major focus, two major objectives. To reduce the need or cancel, in a way, the need of water in the restoration activities, and also to abate the cost of restoration. Why? Because in Lebanon, the National Forest Restoration Plan promotes restoration with irrigation. From our point of view and our knowledge from the Mediterranean region, as a dry land, forest restoration does not need the addition of water if it is well done, if the planting season is the right one, if the planting techniques are the proper one to, as I mentioned before, to store water and avoid soil water evaporation, and if the seedlings or the plant material that is used in the planting activities has been preconditioned to drought and to limited nutrients. If these different features are well managed, according to our vision, water is not needed in the planting activities. The project, in fact, as a result, has reduced the cost from what is foreseen or is the normal cost in the forest restoration activities at the governmental level which is 8.5 euros per seedling planted, to 2 euros per seedling planted, with the objective to keep reducing this cost. The table provides information about the cost. I will not look at this into detail, but you can have a look if you spend more time looking at the PowerPoint presentation. Then another objective was the establishment and the enhancement and establishment of new local enterprises dealing with tree nurseries and the production of native plants. Through the project, a lot of capacity development activities were implemented, and the project managed to develop these new protocols for a large number of native plants, and build the capacity of existing and new small enterprises, local enterprises working on nursery production of seedlings that now are the main providers of plants, not only for the project, but for other planting activities in Lebanon, in different areas of Lebanon. And also making business related to gardening and to the support of agricultural production. In terms of productive terraces, with the project has restored the traditional terraces, dry stone terrace systems, and has supported the sustainable production in these restored terraces. With the objective to diversify production based on native plant species and local crop varieties. The importance of the activity of this activity was that we were looking at the restoration of the terraces as a way to bring back to the landscape people that migrate outside, and also to increase the economic capacity of people that are still living in the landscape, but didn't realize that the agricultural terraces could become an important economic alternative. And we look at the short term and the long term. So diversification included local crop varieties that have production from the first year, and have a local market, especially for the organic products. And at the same time, included the plantation of trees and shrubs with an important economic value, but that will take more time in terms of having production and becoming economically profitable for the landowners. I will not look at the information of the slide. It's just giving information about how many years are needed in order to get production from different native plant species and local crop varieties, and also about the investment needs and when the profits, when the investment will be recovered and the landowner will get profit, a net profit from the activity. Another activity with a cost-benefit vision was related to the turning waste into valuable product. This was a major intervention in this forest landscape restoration project. Why? Because dry biomass from agriculture and from forest are the main cause of forest fires in the region. And we realized that this biomass, the risk of this dry biomass was from one side because of the abandonment of the management of the forest, and from the other side because of the maladaptive practice of farmers to burn the agricultural waste in autumn. So what the project did is to collect the biomass and to establish, support the establishment of a briquettes production plant, which made the briquettes from the forest and the agricultural waste, the forest biomass cuttings, and also from the pruning of the fruit trees in the agricultural land, and the use of the olive pomace resulting from the pressing of the olives for the olive oil. This activity has been very successful in different levels. It has managed to reduce the cost of energy for local communities, because the briquettes cost much less than what people use normally currently. I mean, as a fuel in the landscape, which is diesel, for the same heat generation. So for the same heat generation, it was much more interested for local communities to buy the briquettes than to keep buying diesel. At the same time, this has increased carbon sequestration and reduced significant indoor pollution that is affecting the health of the people. Also, the small enterprise or the briquettes plant has a net profit which is 25% of the sales, and has demonstrated to be an economically viable activity that now is being replicated in other parts of the landscape by other private owners. The fire risk has reduced significantly because not anymore the burning of waste, and because the biomass collection in the forest happened in areas that are like, for instance, buffer areas along roads or in high fire risk areas. So in that way, in the last years, fire risk has significantly reduced. And also shepherds, the project promoted the development of agreements and employment of shepherds for fire prevention. So this was an additional opportunity for income generation or for making use of natural resources for local shepherds. All these activities have a major role in terms of policy improvement. From one side, the project has supported the access of the current forest-related legislation to land users by developing publications in Arabic language, so land users can know much better what are the existing incentives they have to improve land management from the existing policies. At the same time, the activities, the demonstration activities that the project has implemented in terms of biomass management, planting activities with no need of irrigation, or other type of activities, have became important demonstration sites for different actors at the national level. People from the ministries, etc., became visited and realized that a number of activities that were forbidden, like for instance the cutting of biomass in the forest, are not only important but also have an important benefit considering current climate change adaptation impacts and adaptation needs. And through these demonstrations, changes in the policy framework are already happening. And also, what I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the delineation of the boundaries and classification of tenure rights was a major successful activity of the FLR interventions, because this has helped define areas where protection, more strict protection is needed, areas where sustainable management practices should be promoted, areas where no construction or no mining should occur, etc. And the project managed to reach agreements through these municipal communities among stakeholders in different communities in the landscape.